Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Assemblymember Laurie Davies, and my district is the 74th district. It's South Orange County and North San Diego. And I'm so grateful that you're taking the time to do this. I can tell you that e-bikes has been my top priority since being elected to the state assembly in 2020. And it's amazing to see what has changed. During that time, I just left being mayor of Laguna Niguel, and e-bikes were starting to come out. Families were riding them with the kids, and it wasn't really something that was predominant. However, over the past few years, it's definitely grown. And I can tell you, it was very difficult to start getting bills, mainly because of uh, the other state members weren't aware of what we were having down here in the coastal areas. It really was more of a coastal issue when it came to safety and education. And so I can tell you the first bill we did in 2020 literally was to be able to include that schools could educate on e-bikes because there were motored e-bikes. And this was back from like a 1970 ordinance or law that said that you could work with law enforcement and schools. So we had to add in motor e-bikes as well as motor scooters. So it really started from that balance and that bottom. Over the last couple of years, we've been very happy to see that our bills are getting a little bit more meatier. More members are really jumping onto this because, again, this isn't just a coastal issue anymore. You're going to
Entrándose en esto porque esto no nada más es un problema en la costa, también es algo que está pasando alrededor del estado.
kids knowing the rules of the road and safety. And I think we've seen in the last month or so, even more, just what's happening out there when it comes to safety. I mean, in Orange County, we had a 13-year-old boy who was just recently killed after losing control of an electric motorcycle and striking a race center median, which is just tragic. Sure, you've heard in the news as well of 80-year-old pedestrian who was a veteran, was fatally struck by a 14-year-old riding a high-speed electric motorcycle, prompting local authorities to charge the teen's mom with involuntary manslaughter. These are just stories that we're hearing every week. And down in San Diego as well, when it gets to the point in San Diego that the San Diego County Health and Service Agency declared a public health advisory regarding the sharp rise in e-bike accidents and fatalities. So this is something that is California wide, and it was really important to us to really let the parents know what we need to do, what we need to look for. Summer's right around the corner, graduation's already happening, and everything that parents should know, especially being involved with their kids and with their e-bikes. So we're really happy to see that we're doing this. I just wanted you to know that we will be taking questions. If you go down at the bottom where it says chat, put your questions in there. We'll be answering them after all the presentations have happened. Also, again, everybody on the speakers mic will be muted. So I'd like to start out by introducing you the first speaker representing law enforcement, Officer Hunter Gerber from the California Highway Patrol, who will enlighten us on e-bike rules of the road. Officer Gerber.
All right. Thank you. Can you guys all hear me?
Yes.
All right, cool. So basically what we're going to just be covering is just, in essence, e-bikes in general, like what they are, what laws we're actually seeing out on the road that are being broken, and all the different issues, kind of addressing those main concerns. So the first one, like, where can we ride an e-bike? That's usually the most common question we get asked. So when it comes to just e-bikes in general, they can be ridden anywhere traditionally a bike's allowed, whether it's the bike lanes, a bike path on the roads, and really it also depends on the class of the e-bike. There's 3 different classes, and then in a little bit I'll get into like the Surons that are in essence not even e-bikes, they're electric motorcycles. Keep in mind each of the different cities do have local ordinances that could, change the laws. So just make sure you understand your specific city's laws in accordance to e-bikes and where they should be ridden. The laws we're seeing like broken, especially with juveniles, are those that are riding without their helmets. They're carrying more passengers, and when their particular e-bike is only, slated for one person, we're seeing them riding them on the sidewalks. Obviously, if they're like little kids, that's something that's usually not an issue. But when you get your middle schoolers, high schoolers that are riding on the sidewalk, especially at high speeds, I mean, we've seen it. It's already, seriously hurt and killed people doing that. Probably the biggest issue we see just in general is just the failure to obey our simple traffic laws. Whether it's kids going the wrong way, they're cutting into intersections, blowing red lights. I mean, we see it all. And then just the unsafe things just in general, whether they're doing wheelies or the takeovers where you have a group of 10 plus bikes that are taking up the whole lane. So those are the biggest things we're seeing out there. Sometimes like these young kids are just trying to egg us on into, chasing them and stuff like that. So those are just some of the issues we're seeing. So obviously we've addressed a lot of the unsafe riding behavior we've seen especially with a lot of the juveniles, including just going really fast. But probably the biggest one we're seeing is parents are buying what they believe is an e-bike. And there's 3 different classifications. If you go online, I just want to pull it up on my end. We have our class 1. So class 1s are basically a pedal assist, and their speeds can't go any faster than 20 miles per hour. Then you also have your class 2, which is basically throttle power, but once again, it's the max speed of 20. So sometimes these juveniles, especially if they're under the age of 16, they're getting these class 3 bicycles, which they're not allowed to have because it's a pedal assist throttle, and they're going just a lot faster than they should. But the real issue we're seeing are what are known as Surons. A lot of them, they're just electric motorcycles. They mistakenly believe that they're e-bikes because they look very similar, but they actually don't have pedals on them. And a lot of these Surons can go upwards of 60 plus miles per hour. And that's where we're seeing these kids, they're riding on the sidewalks, out in the road. They're unlicensed and sometimes not even wearing helmets. So beginning this year, a lot of people don't know this law that went into effect. It's California Vehicle Code 22651.08. It basically gives us in law enforcement the ability to impound these electric motorcycles and certain e-bikes. In essence, what gives us that authority, if we catch somebody riding a high-powered electric bike or e-bike or a moped that's throttle only going over 20 miles per hour, they don't have a license, we can basically seize that motorcycle e-bike. Underage class 3 riders with basically e-bikes that go over 28 miles per hour, we can seize those as well. And kind of the financial aspect from a parent standpoint is obviously we can seize them up to 48 hours. That means they have to come pick it up and they have to basically pay towing fees. I know standard fees are usually between $300 fee plus $100 a day storage fee, minimum of 2 to 3 days. So it's between $500 to $600 to get these e-bikes out. So that's all I have for right now. Is there any other specific things you wanted me to address?
Laurie, you need to unmute yourself.
You know what? I think that's good, officer. We'll probably have questions for you
Okay.
after all of the speakers, and we'll come back to you then if that's good. But thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, great. Next up is Morgan Heggie, who is the president of the Independent Insurance Agents and Brokers of San Diego County. Morgan will be addressing insurance and liability issues associated with e-bikes. And this is really important because most of us aren't aware of the liability issues. Morgan, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Everybody can hear me okay? Most people don't realize that homeowners policies don't cover e-bikes the same as they cover other bicycles. So there's actually exclusions on your homeowner's insurance policy that you wouldn't be covered for motorized vehicles. And the e-bikes, especially the class 2 and class 3 that the CHP officer Gerber was speaking about are absolutely excluded. We do see some policies from some carriers extend coverage for the class 1 pedal assist kind of only bicycles. but there's interesting perceptions from most of the population. They assume that they're covered for their liability limit on there, where that's where they're actually not covered, and they probably do have some coverage for theft or damage to the bicycle. So, but the liability standards on e-bikes and e-motorcycles are excluded under the homeowner's policy. So the next important question is if your child is driving their e-bike, and they were to hurt someone else, what would that cause? Would that be a triggering event for there to be liability protection under your homeowner's insurance? The next thing I hear from clients a lot of the time is they assume that then their umbrella policy will extend coverage over that. But that is also not true, because it requires underlying liability limits on a policy. So it would either need to be listed on a motorcycle policy or listed as a vehicle on an auto insurance policy, something like that. And it is difficult. There are not that many carriers. This is new evolving territory. There aren't that, and as everybody can attest to, the insurance regulations in California to get things approved are arduous at best. So it takes time for them to have those sort of things approved through the Department of Insurance to be able to extend coverage into these new classification of vehicles. And the next question is who's ultimately responsible when a minor is involved in an accident? Obviously the child's responsible, but the kids don't have any money. So it comes down to landing on the parents. And what we see is if there's no coverage under the liability insurance, either from the homeowner's insurance policy, the umbrella policy, the auto insurance policy, it's not a listed vehicle on a motorized vehicle policy like a motorcycle policy, then the parents' assets are basically what are going to backstop that. So the economic losses that can occur can be quite significant, not to mention the loss of life, like everybody else is more concerned about, obviously. But I think that there's just a lack of education and understanding about the pitfalls of these kinds of vehicles on our public roadways. So that's about what I had prepared. But if anybody has any questions, I will be happy to respond after everyone's had a chance to speak.
Thank you, Morgan. I appreciate it. All right, next up is a fantastic panel of physicians from Rady Children's Hospital, Orange County in San Diego. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Laura Goldman, Dr. Romeo Ignacio, and Dr. Justin Ashun, and CPNC Mary Magnus, Trauma Program Coordinator. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with Dr. Romeo Ignacio, who's with the Trauma Medical Director.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I first want to thank Assemblywoman Davies for organizing this webinar. I think this is an important topic. I also want to thank Tim, as well as the members of the Rady Children's Health, who's been instrumental in us getting to this topic, which we have been dealing with for the last few years. We're really concerned and obviously have this opportunity to share about this important information of this rapidly growing problem, a problem that you all have seen on the news, not only just locally, but nationally. And it's an important problem we need to address among children and teenagers. Our team, just as described, is a wonderful team, both from the Rady Children's Health from San Diego and Orange County. And I think it's important for them to introduce themselves so you can understand their background. So Dr. Goodman, if you would like to start off first.
Thanks, Dr. Ignacio. So I'm the Trauma Medical Director at Rady Children's Health in Orange County, formerly CHOC. I've been doing research on e-bikes since nearly the time that I started at CHOC in 2022. I started in 21 and started seeing that this was a problem. So happy to be able to share some information about that today. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Justin Assoon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Assoon. I'm one of the emergency physician at Rady Children's San Diego, and I do a lot of the work as it relates to injury prevention and advocacy for our department. Thank you for having me.
And Mary, please.
Mary may not have a good connection.
My name is Romeo Ignacio. I'm the Laura Goodman's counterpart here in San Diego. I'm the Trauma Medical Director. I'm also head of the advocacy group for the American College of Surgeons and also part of the Central COT. Large advocate for many topics, but most importantly, e-bikes. and think this is an important part that needs to be addressed today. Next slide, please. I think it's important to start with the big picture. Over the last few years, we have seen a dramatic rise in e-bike injuries since 2020, 2021. If you look at the slides or the boxes on the left at Orange County, injuries have increased 430% since 2022. I think that's a number to emphasize, 430%. And e-bikes in Orange County are the #1 cause of injury that we are seeing in this category. You can see that the most common age is about 14 years, which is similar to what we're seeing in San Diego. And San Diego, we've had even a higher rate of increase. It went numbers from 3 now to 262 a year. Chances are it's going to be a higher number in 2026, but we saw 1,770% increase in e-bike injuries. We are #2 as the the #2 cause for mechanism of injury after falls. And again, like I mentioned, it's mostly in teenagers. Next slide.
So I'll chime in about the data from the Orange County campus of Rady Children's Health. This line graph shows the difference between what we've seen in e-bikes with the injury rates and what we're seeing in our hospital. These are severely injured patients who are being activated as trauma patients because they meet certain criteria. You see them shown in the white line here, shooting up from 2021 to 2025 on a trajectory to increase again this year. As Dr. Ignacio said about San Diego, that's true at our campus as well. Meanwhile, you're seeing that pedal bike injuries have stayed the same or even gone down a little bit during that same period of time. Next slide, please. This one shows, again, the age distribution. We mentioned the average age already being teenagers. The bar chart that's shown in the upper left here shows the ages. So there are not 0 injuries down to the lowest age children. We still see some, but the numbers are really low. And then they peak at 14 years in Orange County and then go down as kids become eligible to drive cars. We think that's why. In the upper right, you can see e-bike accidents by gender. 85% of the kids that we are seeing with e-bike accidents in our hospital are male, and only 15% are female. In the bottom left, you can see the most common types of injuries we see from e-bikes. #1 is head injury, and that's all types of different head injuries, from mild concussions to really severe, devastating traumatic brain injuries and skull fractures of all different types. Next is leg and arm fractures. After that, abdominal injuries. And then #4 is face and teeth injuries, some of which are very severe and requiring operative fixation by our plastic surgery and dental teams. In the bottom right, you can see the top mechanisms of e-bike injuries. #1 is crashing the e-bike. That's a single vehicle crash, 37%. 23% fall off the bike. And then, #1 would be the auto versus e-bike, and that's 38.8% shown in the white there. E-bike versus pedestrian accounts for a small number of the injuries that we see due to e-bikes, and that's unclear if we're capturing all of those injuries adequately, but that's what we've seen to date. Next slide, please.
So similarly, if you look at the age distribution, we see it in a similar age group, just as Orange County. It's between the ages of 11 and 14. But I want you to look at the upper left graph. What you're not noticing is those small little bars all the way to the left. The youngest age that we are seeing now, e-bike injuries, are as low as age 4 and 5. Most don't know that they actually make e-bikes for age 4 and 5, which is sort of, you have to ask, is that the right thing to do for children? I think the answer is quite obvious. If you look at the graph on the upper right at e-bike accidents per year, as I discussed before, in 2021, we saw 3. This past year in 2025, we saw over 260. In the first 3 months this year in 2026, we saw 89. We will probably have e-bikes as the #1 mechanism of injury as we are seeing now in Orange County. And this just reflects the growing problem that we're seeing not only in our county, Orange County, but in many other states across the United States. Most of our e-bikes injuries that we see are much more severe. Many people don't seem to understand is that it says electric bicycle, but it's more than just electric bicycle. They're motorized vehicles. We are seeing kids being admitted to the ICU for severe head injuries, abdominal injuries. We recently published our research looking at orthopedic injuries, and the likelihood of having an orthopedic injury in comparison to traditional non-motorized bikes is 2.5 times more. Although most kids do pretty well, the injury severity is much more severe. And to give a understanding of some of the trauma things that we're seeing, when you get injured as a child at one of our children's hospitals, that means that you are having such a high mechanism of injury, such a large physiologic injury that you require the services of a trauma surgeon, an ER physician, and intensivist to address the needs of a child. And that's why we think it's an important topic to discuss today. Next slide. When
This
we
is,
Go ahead.
sorry, go ahead, Dr. Ignacio.
When we look at the severity of some of these injuries, this is a little bit different because, like Dr. Goodman had talked about, we have done a fair amount of research. The research is quite alarming. We see many more fractures, especially in the extremities, in the pelvis, which is the lower part of the belly, and the spine. The facial injuries that Dr. Goodman has talked about, we usually require an oral maxillofacial surgeon, a dentist, a plastic surgeon, because of the large impact to the face. And the internal injuries are something that we cannot ignore because these injuries sometimes require surgery. Again, we don't typically see that for conventional bicycles. Dr. Goodman, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add on, this is just an example of the injury pattern that we can see in a single patient. This schematic shows the multiple different injuries that we found in just one, with a cut to the nose, a break of the nose, broken teeth, a broken jaw, cut on the cheek, cut on the lip, fracture of the thoracic spine, the upper spine, a fracture of the shoulder blade, bruises of the lungs, fracture of the left arm and a cut on the left arm, blood in the urine, fractures of the pelvis, pelvic bones and hip, a fracture of the ankle and a fracture of the other ankle too, and then cuts. So all of this can be in one single patient. And these are, as Dr. Ignacio was saying, really severe injuries because of the force these patients are crashing with. These are very different from traditional bicycles.
Next slide.
And just to highlight why we can see such dramatic and such extensive injuries, I'm going to take us all back to high school when we learned physics to a simple equation where the kinetic energy is equal to half the mass times the velocity squared. So really that means that the energy scales with a square of the velocity. And to simplify that, really we'll compare it to the kinetic energy of someone walking. So if there was a child on foot walking, running at 3 miles an hour, they have about 1 times the kinetic energy of that same child walking. But when you compare that to a child on a bike traveling at 10 miles per hour, that's about 11 times the kinetic energy compared to walking. Now moving to the e-bikes, the class 1s and 2s, where you're traveling at a max of 20 miles per hour, now you've got 44 times the kinetic energy versus walking, and only increase that by 8 miles per hour. But you see a dramatic increase in that kinetic energy of 87 times. And as the officer was saying, once you move into the e-motorcycles and you're traveling at 60 miles plus per hour, that kinetic energy is even more exponential. Next slide, please. And so some take-home points and ways that we're promoting and advocating for safety is really, as we mentioned, these injuries are severe and they are related to speed. And so maintain a slower speed will help assist in decreasing the extent of the injuries, but really also the appropriate protective gear is incredibly important. The same helmet you would wear to ride a pedal bicycle should not be the same helmet that you ride for a class 1, class 2, or class 3 e-bike, and certainly not an e-motorcycle. And so it's very important for families as they are purchasing these different motorized vehicles is to understand the protective wear that would be crucial for their children and even themselves to wear when riding these motorized vehicles. There are different classifications and different helmets tested for various different speeds. And then ride smart. Most of the accidents that we are seeing, as Officer Gerber was saying, are oftentimes children don't have the insight or to follow the rules of the road. And so they're not perceivable or predictable by other drivers and experienced drivers. And so they're going through red lights, they're blowing through crosswalks without stopping. And many drivers on the road are expecting them to stop, but may not. And so we're seeing many accidents develop or occur because of that. And so really keeping that in mind, knowing your child's limitations and sort of abilities is a big part in keeping them safe. Next slide, please. And so a call to action, one of the things that I've been working on and our team at Rady Children's has been working on is, especially as legislative bills and ordinances are being put in place, is we created an online sort of interactive e-bike curriculum, very similar to a knowledge-based curriculum that teen drivers need to go through before they obtain their permits. We created something similar, about 8-module curriculum that is completely free, open to the community to access, and will take a child and their family through both e-bike safety as well as what to do in emergency situations if they're involved in a collision. And right now we're working with local school districts throughout San Diego County to make this available for all students and families. And if you scan the QR code, it'll take you right to the site if you're interested. Next slide, please. And so I think we'll open up to questions.
Do you mind going back? Oh, that's okay. At the end, if we can show up that QR code for longer period of time so all of our audience has an opportunity to go to that link. But thank you.
Yeah, we will share that QR code with everyone via email following this meeting.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay, it sounds like, first of all, I want to say thank you. Great information. I think, yeah, a lot of us are speechless when we're looking at these numbers, and something that we could take very serious. I just wanted to go, before we go to questions, since we've been working on e-bike bills for the last 6 years, and we're proud to see that our bill, which is AB 1569, it just made it into the Senate because we're realizing that we need to have one universal certification so that it doesn't go city to city. Now, we understand, obviously, the cities, they have their own ordinances. It's the local control of knowing their city. But we were really happy because we wanted to make sure we had CHP working with our schools, because the schools are dealing a lot with these, because that's where a lot of the kids are riding their bikes to during the weekdays, that they're going hand in hand, and they'll be putting together a certification program. So we'll be keeping an eye on that, but look for this, because we would love to have your support over in the Senate, letting them know to please pass this bill. And we'll keep going. We know there's so much more that needs to be done. And unfortunately, in this time and era, technology tends to move faster than we can get ahead of it. And so the bottom line is we have to make sure that our kids are safe, that our law enforcement actually have the tools they can to enforce this. And I think the biggest thing for me is making sure parents are aware. We had talked to a few law officers, and they had said that some of these parents had never even been on the e-bike that their kids were riding. And so they had no idea how fast these bikes moved, how quickly to turn a corner, and again, just learning the basic rules of the road. So we're going to keep on making sure that we're doing everything we possibly can, working with all the members up here. Again, this is definitely a bipartisan issue, and safety comes first. So Tim and Donna, I'm going to hand this over to you so that you can address the questions.
Okay, so there's going to be maybe a couple of our different panelists that can answer some of these. So we'll start. There was a lot of comments about, should there be a minimum age for riding an e-bike, no matter what the classification is? Maybe we can have the the physicians weigh in on, coordination and what a child goes through developing and when would be a good time or not ever, sorry. And then maybe Officer Hunter could go ahead and weigh in on some of these questions. So age of a rider, what should it be?
This is Dr.
Yeah,
Goodman.
go
Go
ahead, Dr.
ahead.
Goodman. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Dr. Asyun, may you have some good perspective on the development of pediatric patients more than I do as a surgeon on the trauma side. But for the injuries that I see, I mean, and the abilities that kids have to control bikes, I don't want to see a kid riding a bike that's heavier than they are. I don't want to see a 60-pound kid riding an 80-pound bike. I don't think that they're going to be able to control it adequately. So my personal sort of it's not based on any real data. That's the caveat there. But I don't want to see kids younger than 12 riding, but that's just my personal opinion. Sorry, Dr. Ignacio, Dr. Arcion, you have other comments?
Justin, go ahead. You can go first.
Okay. Yes, I mean, I certainly know the developmental milestones, but they're all focused around a baby goes throughout their first year into their first few years of life, but there's really no great data that we have of the coordination and abilities. But it's more than just the coordination, it's coordination and the cognitive ability once you start hitting 10, 11, 12. And so really, where do you put that lower limit? All our recommendations in medicine tend to be based off of data, and I don't think we have the data to make that call just yet. But I agree with Dr. Goodman. I would go with as I kind of mentioned in that slide, the kinetic energy is related to the weight and the velocity. And so if you've got a bike that weighs heavier than the kid, it's going to be much harder for that child to control that bike. And now, as Dr. Ignacio mentioned, we're having bikes, being ridden by 4 and 5-year-olds. So
There is some literature to support some of the work I do is with the American Academy of Pediatrics as well as the American Pediatric Surgical Association. If you look at some of the data from the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, not exactly directly related to e-bikes, but for motorized vehicles, the recommendation that children less than 9 should never be on any type of motorized vehicle, and then children 9 to 12 should not operate anything more than 10 miles per hour. Now, that has never been extrapolated to e-bikes. Like there's no specific e-bikes, but I think you can make the point about that speed is an issue. And so that's the reason why many states have adopted the rule of 12 and less. If you look at the various states that do have e-bike laws, the ages range anywhere from as low as 12 all the way to 16, all the way to 18. Now, the American Academy of Pediatrics, currently I'm on a board that is going to make a position paper this coming year. And the recommendation will be that, for at least 16 years of age should be for e-bikes or similar powered vehicles. Part of that is the developmental readiness, the judgment and hazard recognition that Justin had talked about. And that sort of aligns with the judgment doing it. Again, the data for e-bikes is coming. We are currently doing a risk behavior assessment for teenagers on e-bikes that's going on. That's to the University of Colorado, and we'll have that data hopefully by next year. But as the data emerges, it clearly shows there is some cutoff where there is an increased risk based upon age and experience. And that is also reflective on the hazards of the speed, acceleration that comes with the bikes. And that will be somewhere between 12 to 16 years of age. But hopefully next year or two, we'll have definitive recommendations for the American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as from the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission.
Thank you. Officer Gerber?
All right. So obviously we have to go by what state law is guiding us right now as far as like ages, everything else. So right now, the big factor is that anybody under the age of 16 cannot have a class 3 e-bike just because of the speed and everything else with it. So right now that's kind of the priority. Besides that, just being basically I'm a teacher. I go out and actually teach bike rodeos and stuff like that. Doesn't matter if it's an e-bike or a regular bike. You don't want to get a bike that's too big for that particular person. So we go by just making sure their feet can actually touch the ground, So if you're going to buy an e-bike, just make sure it's actually at height, weight, where the child actually has the ability to kind of control that bike.
Great. Officer Gerber, can you repeat that vehicle code? We had a couple people ask.
Yeah, I mean, pull it up. It's 22. So it's gonna be 22651.08 of the California Vehicle Code. So, and typically what they require too in order for somebody to get their e-bike or, out of a tow yard is they have to take, basically, it's an online bicycle and e-bike safety class that we have on our CHP page and get the certificate as proof as, taking it. Basically, it's an online class.
Great. There's a couple of that I think Assemblymember Davies can answer. Is there a bill to mandate e-bike training classes, like a behind the wheel training program for a car, driving a car?
From that I know of, there isn't. And that's one of the things when we were talking about a certification and working with the schools of CHP that, having an online test is one thing. And let's face it, I mean, you can find answers, and I'm not sure, how stringent that is. But I think we really need to have one where they get onto the bike and you have, just like you do behind the wheel, and you have somebody watching them. What do you do when you come up to a turn? What are the hand signals? I've never seen hand signals on e-bikes as they're turning. I don't see blinkers because there aren't blinkers on there. So I think that we have to have both a physical and a written test. But I think it's something that also I think the parents have to be part of, especially if they're under 16 right now. I think the parent needs to be at these certification classes so they are learning as well. I think it's just as important that they're doing the same test so that they can also make sure their kids are, following the rules.
We know your bill changed a little bit when your initial bill was to mandate that kids could not ride their bike to school unless they had taken a training class, which was, some folks didn't like that, so it got removed. But one more question for you is the manufacturers of e-bikes need to reduce how fast e-bikes can travel. I know you had a bill last year on that.
Yes, we actually had a bill because you have these illegal apps where they're actually able to change the speed. And obviously the max you can have is 750 watts, which is the class 3. And so it is illegal to sell any of these apps that can change the speed of the bike. And there will be enforcement. And as you can see, there's so many rules now and things that our law enforcement have to address. And I think one of the biggest things is, again, giving them the tools of the road. But even when you're looking at a class 3, how can they tell it's a class 3? And how can they even tell the difference between perhaps a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old? And so those are the things that we have to work on, but we have to make sure that, when you're going to pass a law, you have to make sure that it's actually we're able to enforce it. So that's why it's so important that we collaborate with law enforcement and schools and parents.
Thank you. So here's a little bit longer question. And I'm not sure who this would be for, maybe Officer Gerber. With a standard pedal bicycle, and for the most part, cars and motorcycles, the driver's age of acceleration and deceleration is somewhat predictable. However, with e-bikes, class 3 and likely class 2, they are oftentimes unpredictable as to what to expect of their behavior, especially with young teens. Think middle-age school. This points back to training. Public service training is great and needed, but dare I say most of the offenders will likely have little interest in learning the rules of the road. Many of our roadways have become a free-for-all. It makes me nervous as a father to have my 20-something daughters having to deal with this while they are driving their cars. Plus, they spend a lot of time and training to get a car license. Why do e-bikers get a free pass?
All right. I mean, I totally feel the frustration just being in my personal car. I can't tell you how many I've almost hit just because they pull out of driveways, extra roadways, everything else. Right now, there's no sort of like driver's education right now with e-bikes. And, unfortunately, if you can go back to middle school, I know middle school, you're at that growing spurt, you're going through puberty, you're kind of rebellious. So you kind of mix that with something brand new. I mean, that's just kind of what's out there. I know we're doing our best to, enforce these laws. And sometimes, these guys like to, run from us because they think it's fun or a game, and they know that they can cut through parking lots and stuff, places we can't go. So, so sometimes I think they just try to take advantage of it. So I think right now it's just looking, and, as laws are being developed, we'll do our best to enforce those laws.
Thank you. One of the problems we have in California is how best to partner with law enforcement and schools to enforce bicycle and e-bike safety. Currently, bicycle helmet and e-bike helmet violations is a fix-it ticket, but do we not see a lot of law enforcement being engaged in rules of the road or but we do not see a lot of law enforcement being engaged in the rules of the road or helmet enforcement? Any comments on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, this week we'll be doing, us, we're highway patrol. We have different jurisdictional areas. Obviously, some of the bigger cities, they have their own police departments that can go out and, handle those different things. We'll be out in like just the Valley Center region, just because that's one of the areas we patrol, doing some school zone enforcement. Obviously, we're going into the summer months, but that's typically where we address it in our jurisdictions, is like going to and from school, because that's where we see it a lot more, trying to address the helmets, make sure they're riding correctly. In addition, just to even drivers being distracted and stuff like that. So it's a lot of different things, and we have like so much manpower, but we try to get just different like little operational things where we'll have a handful of officers try to hit specific areas where we're seeing issues. So a lot of the unincorporated areas where we patrol, we'll do school zone enforcement. So whether it's before school or after school.
Thank you. Dr. Soon and Dr. Ignacio, you've written in the chat about helmet recommendations. Can you elaborate that outside of the chat here?
Sure.
Justin, you want to go ahead and take that one?
Sure. So typically, anytime I'm having this conversation with any families, there are helmets have different classifications. There's the MIPS classification, which typically you'll see in many of the helmets that people would use for just regular pedal bikes, skateboards, scooters, etc. But for e-bikes, it's a Dutch classification. It's an NTA 8776 classification. And this essentially gives the helmet and it means it's been tested to sustain and protect the skull at a higher impact, I believe up to 28 miles per hour. And so with essentially class 3 is reaching 28 miles per hour. Anyone on a class 1, 2, or 3 bike, I usually recommend the rider have an NTA 8776 helmet classification. And then to be even safer, DOT helmets are ones that are have a full sort of face shield, are going to protect the rider even more, especially with the types of injuries, as Dr. Goodman and Dr. Ignacio said. We are seeing substantial jaw fractures, facial fractures, dental injuries. And so that's going to provide a little bit more protection, especially when it comes to the lower mandible.
Thank you so much. I think we've gone through most of these questions. We will take these questions and record answers to them. And Tim, we're able to send those out to those participants, correct?
That's correct.
Yes. So we'll just turn it back over to Assemblymember Davies right now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time. And all of those have participated. Great information. And again, I think something that you'll hear from me, as well as I hear from parents and those that are in my district, is there's a frustration, because we understand e-bikes, we grew up with bikes. They're completely different. And there's a freedom there for the kids, gives them an activity, a fun activity to do. But we're finding, obviously, that we're not seeing the accountability or the responsibility of these children, these teens, and the parents taking when it comes to this. And this is so important because we're looking at what these, like I said, these are motor vehicles pretty much. And if you think about it, you know, when you're just within your city, your speeds are probably somewhere around 30, 35 miles an hour max when you're just going down through your residential area, probably even less. And so these bikes are getting very close to that point. And our kids' brains aren't quite there. They're not there for the response that we need. And so we're, you know, I'm really grateful to hear, doctors, that you're actually having a risk assessment, because I think really that's going to be probably one of the most important things, is coming up and saying, listen, by looking, I mean, you know really what this is all about, and being able to have information from you and what you think is safe when it comes to what type of helmet, what age someone should wear. And the other difference is when you have a car, cars all go the same speed. You know, they can go all the way up to 100 miles an hour, but we're looking at different types of bikes here that all have something different, and trying to say, all right, when you're this age, you can have a bike that runs to this speed, and you need this helmet, and it just keeps moving up within a span, but they're still all teenagers and even less than that. I think we really need to condense what we're having out there eventually. And I want to say things to the businesses out there too. You know what? E-bikes, like I said, you know what? It can, done safely, it is a great thing people are using to get to work, especially when you look at the cost of gas. Using them if they are a far distance or they can't afford a car. They're really good things that you can do with having these e-bikes. But I think right now, when we look at the numbers, our kids come first. Safety comes first for everyone, but especially when it comes to our children and our teens. And so we are going to continue to work on this. Like I said, we're finally seeing progress. And I think number one is we have to make sure that kids are responsible and the parents are responsible and they're accountable, and that this isn't a slap on the wrist. It's not just a misdemeanor, because that isn't doing anything at this point. But again, now that we have this being probably one of the top issues when it comes to safety throughout California, I think we'll get a little bit more. And that's why we want to reach out to you. We want to find out what your thoughts are, and we will continue to do that. So I say thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone that attended this program. Again, we're going to be putting this on our site down the line so that you can let people know as well. But thank you for taking the time, and things that change with new bills that go through this year, we'll let you know what's happening with Davies Dispatch. Thank you.